The wedding invitation sat on my kitchen counter for days, mocking me with its crisp white paper and elegant silver script. Hazel Fisher, it read my full name spelled out like I was a stranger, not family. My sister's getting married, and I'm just a formality on her guest list. At 29, I've built a life nobody knows about, a secret I've kept for a decade. But her words still sting her voice sharp and smug, calling me a nobody, a dead-end freelancer who never made it. She's wrong, but I've let her believe it. The wedding's in St. Augustine, Florida, her fiancé's hometown, a place where I've always felt like an outsider. In 3 weeks, I'll walk into that coastal hotel, face her judgment, and decide if I'm ready to shatter her perfect little world. Her husband doesn't know who I really am. Neither does she. But when the moment comes, I won't hold back. If you're hooked on this family drama and want to see how my secret flips everything upside down, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications now. I sat at my desk staring at the laptop screen, the glow of my latest project proposal fading as memories crept in. 10 years ago, I was just another college kid with big dreams, but life had other plans. My mother, Patricia, walked out on Dad when I was 15, chasing a better life with Edward, her new husband a real estate mogul with a flashy smile and fancier connections. She took my older sister Ivy with her into that glitzy world, leaving me to pick up the pieces with Dad. Ivy, 3 years older, soaked up Edward's influence like a sponge. She started seeing me as the leftover, the kid who'd never amount to anything. I poured myself a coffee black, no sugar, the way I liked it since my startup days. My mother's departure wasn't just a divorce. It was a line drawn in the sand. Patricia wanted more money, more status, more everything. She saw Dad's steady job as a high school teacher as a dead end. You could have been someone, she'd tell him, her voice dripping with disappointment. I heard those words echo in my head for years. When she left, I stayed with Dad, but Ivy chose the mansion, the private schools, the life Edward promised. She was 18, old enough to decide, and she decided I was beneath her. By the time I was 19, Dad got sick cancer, the kind that doesn't give you much time. I juggled college and hospital visits, watching him fade, while Ivy sent postcards from her fancy vacations. After he passed, I was alone, scraping by on scholarships and part-time jobs. Patricia offered me a room in Edward's house, but I'd rather sleep on the street than owe them anything. That's when I met Stephen, my business partner, in a biotech seminar my junior year. He was brilliant, obsessive about gene editing tech, but terrible with numbers. I was the opposite, sharp with budgets, logistics, and strategy. We clicked, and by 22 we'd launched VitalGenix, a biotech startup that started small, testing rare enzymes for medical research. I leaned back in my chair, the coffee gone cold. VitalGenix wasn't just a company, it was my lifeline. By our second year, we'd secured contracts with top-tier labs. By year 5, we were a name in the industry, pulling in millions in revenue. But I kept it quiet. No flashy cars, no penthouse apartments, just a modest condo and a wardrobe of thrift store finds. I told everyone I was a freelance consultant, a vague enough title to dodge questions. Why? Because I saw what money did to Patricia, to Ivy. It turned them into people who measured worth in dollars and connections. I didn't want their pity or their sudden interest once they smelled success. Ivy bought the act completely. When we met for coffee a few years back, she glanced at my worn sneakers and smirked. Still freelancing, Hazel, she asked, her tone laced with pity. I nodded, biting back the truth. She'd gone to business school, landed a marketing job at VitalGenix, ironic, right, and never once suspected I was the co-founder. Nathan, her fiancé, was worse. He worked in our sales division, always bragging about his deals, his bonuses, his life with Ivy. To him, I was the sister-in-law who'd never make it, a nobody scraping by on gig work. He'd laugh, call me the freelancer like it was a punchline. I never corrected them. At first, it was about protecting myself. After Dad died, I couldn't handle more rejection, more judgment. If Ivy and Patricia knew about Vitalgenics, they'd see me as a bank account, not a person. Later, it became about pride. I wanted Ivy to value me for me, not my success. But she never did. Our calls dwindled to birthday texts, holiday cards, and the occasional awkward lunch where she'd lecture me on getting my life together. Nathan would nod along, his smug grin, saying he'd picked the better sister. Stephen knew about my family drama. He'd urge me to come clean, especially when Ivy joined Vitalgenics. Why let them think you're a failure, he'd ask over late-night strategy sessions. I'd shrug, saying it wasn't about them, but deep down it was. I wanted Ivy to see me without the filter of money or status. I wanted her to care about her little sister, not the co-founder of a biotech empire. But every time we talked, her words cut deeper, her superiority more obvious. She'd moved on with her perfect life, her perfect fiancé, leaving me in the dust, or so she thought. The truth was, I'd built something bigger than she could imagine. Vitalgenics wasn't just a job, it was a revolution in biotech with my name on the patents, the contracts, the vision. But to Ivy, I was still the kid who stayed with Dad, the one who didn't choose the mansion. Her wedding was coming, and with it, a chance to face her world head-on. I sipped the last of my coffee, staring at the invitation I'd tossed aside days ago. Nathan didn't know who I was. Neither did Ivy. But soon they'd find out whether I was ready or not. The cab dropped me off in St. Augustine, Florida, outside a small inn called the Seaside Haven. I'd chosen it for its low-key vibe, nice enough to blend in, not fancy enough to raise eyebrows. My suitcase bumped against the cobblestone path as I checked in, the weight of the next few days heavier than my luggage. Ivy's wedding was in 2 days at the historic Casa Monica Hotel, Nathan's hometown choice. I hadn't been here since I was a kid, dragged along for a family vacation where Ivy and Patricia fawned over Edward's wealth while I wandered the old fort alone. Back then, I was the odd one out. Nothing had changed. I hung my dress a simple navy number professional, but understated, in the closet, and sat on the bed staring at my phone. Stephen had texted, "You sure about this? You don't owe them anything." He was right. But this wasn't about owing. It was about facing Ivy, Nathan, and the family that wrote me off as a failure. I'd spent a decade building Vitalgenics, turning it into a biotech powerhouse, yet to them I was still the freelancer scraping by. The lie had been my shield, but it was starting to feel like a cage. I decided to walk the town before the pre-wedding dinner tonight. St. Augustine's narrow streets buzzed with tourists, but I barely noticed them. My mind was on Ivy. The last time we met 6 months ago at a cafe in Miami, she'd sighed dramatically when I mentioned my consulting gigs. "Hazel, you're almost 30, she said, her voice thick with judgment. "Don't you want more than this?" Nathan, sitting across from her, smirked and added, "Some people are fine, just getting by." I'd smiled, swallowed the jab, and changed the subject. They had no idea I'd co-founded the company they both worked for, Nathan in sales, Ivy in marketing. The irony was almost too perfect. I stopped at a bookstore pretending to browse, but really I was stalling. Facing Ivy meant facing her version of me, the sister who never made it, the one who stayed with Dad while she climbed Edward's social ladder. Patricia would be there too, probably with Edward, both acting like they'd done me a favor by inviting me. I could already hear Patricia's voice. "Hazel, you should settle down, find stability." She'd said it at Dad's funeral, her eyes flicking to my worn coat, assuming I was broke. I wasn't. Vitalgenics had just landed a $10 million contract that year, but I let her believe what she wanted. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Stephen. "Nathan's been bragging about a big deal at work. He thinks I sealed it for him." I snorted. That deal, a partnership with a major hospital, was my idea. My negotiations, my late nights crunching data. Nathan just signed the papers and took the credit. I typed back, "Let him think that. For now." Stephen replied with a thumbs up. He'd always backed my choice to stay low-key, but lately he'd been pushing me to drop the act. "They don't deserve your silence," he'd said last week, his voice sharp with frustration. I wasn't so sure. Back at the inn, I changed for the dinner. The navy dress fit perfectly professional, but not showy, the kind of thing a freelancer might wear to a fancy event. I wasn't here to impress. I was here to survive. The Casa Monica was a 15-minute walk, its Spanish-style arches looming as I approached. I arrived right on time, not a minute early or late. The doorman checked my name, Hazel Fisher, no title, no warmth, and led me to a private room with tall windows and chandeliers. The place was packed with Ivy's friends, Nathan's colleagues, and faces I vaguely recognized from childhood Thanksgivings. I spotted Ivy at the center, her auburn hair swept up her laugh, loud and performative. Nathan stood beside her, all charm and polished smiles, shaking hands like he owned the room. They hadn't noticed me yet. I took a deep breath and moved toward them, bracing for the inevitable. Ivy saw me first, her smile freezing into something polite but cold. "Hazel," she said, her voice clipped like she was checking off a box. "You made it." No hug, no warmth, just a nod. Nathan turned, his grin faltering for a split second before he recovered. "Good to see you, Hazel," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Must have been a stretch to get here." I forced a smile. "I manage." They introduced me to Nathan's parents, Frank and Ellen Parker, a silver-haired couple with the kind of polish that screamed old money. "This is Hazel Ivy's sister," Nathan said, pausing before adding, "She's a freelancer. You know, the independent type." Frank raised an eyebrow and Ellen gave a tight smile like I was a curiosity they didn't quite understand. The small talk was excruciating. Ivy and Nathan played the perfect couple while I stood there fielding questions about my gigs. "So what do you do exactly?" Ellen asked, her tone more pitying than curious. "A bit of consulting," I said, vaguely dodging details. Nathan chuckled. "Hazel's got that free spirit vibe. Not everyone's cut out for the corporate grind." Ivy shot him a look but didn't correct him. I clenched my glass, the urge to spill everything rising like bile. Then I saw Stephen across the room, his tailored suit and easy confidence making him stand out. He was talking to a group of Vitalgenics employees, all unaware I was his partner, not just some guest. Nathan spotted him too, his eyes lighting up. "That's Mr. Grant," he whispered to Ivy, loud enough for me to hear. "My boss. He's the reason I'm climbing the ladder." I bit my lip hard. Stephen had signed off on Nathan's promotion, but only after I'd vouched for him. The lie was suffocating me now. Stephen caught my eye and gave a subtle nod, our silent code. He'd agreed to keep my role quiet, but I could see the question in his gaze. "How long are you going to play this game?" I looked away, my mind racing. Ivy's dismissal, Nathan's smugness, Patricia's inevitable lecture, it was all too much. I could walk away, let them keep their assumptions and stay invisible. Or I could step into the light, let the truth hit them like a freight train. The dinner was about to start, and with it, the moment I'd have to choose. The private room at Casa Monica buzzed with chatter-clinking glasses and the kind of forced cheer that weddings bring. I stood near the edge, clutching a glass of sparkling water, watching Ivy hold court like a queen. Her laugh cut through the noise, sharp and calculated, as she leaned into Nathan, her arm looped through his. The room was a mix of their colleagues, distant cousins, and friends I didn't recognize, all orbiting the perfect couple. I felt like a ghost invited out of obligation, not affection. My navy dress blended into the crowd, but the weight of my secret made me feel like I was carrying a bomb. Ivy spotted me and waved me over, her smile tight. "Hazel, come meet some people," she called, her voice sweet, but laced with something else, pity maybe, or superiority. I walked over, steeling myself. Nathan turned his grin wide, but his eyes cold. "Everyone, this is Hazel," my sister Ivy said, pausing for effect. "She's a freelancer, you know, doing her own thing." The way she said freelancer made it sound like a disease. A few guests nodded politely, but their eyes flicked away, dismissing me. Nathan chuckled, leaning toward a group of Vitalgenics colleagues. "Hazel's the independent type," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Not big on the 9 to 5, right?" I forced a smile, my fingers tightening around the glass. "I get by," I said, keeping my voice even. Ivy's smirk grew. "Oh, she's fine with her little gigs," she added, loud enough for the group to hear. "Some people don't need much to be happy." The words landed like a slap, and a few colleagues exchanged awkward glances. I could have corrected her right there, told them I co-founded the company they worked for, but I bit my tongue. Not yet. I moved away, pretending to study the appetizer table when Patricia and Edward walked in. Hazel Patricia said, her tone warm but patronizing, like she was greeting a lost puppy. "You look nice." Edward gave a curt nod. "Good to see you," he said, already scanning the room for someone more interesting. I nodded back, calling her mom to her face, but thinking of her as Patricia. She'd never been a mother, not really, not after she left Dad. I excused myself, weaving through the crowd, my chest tight with old wounds. Then I saw Steven standing by the bar, his easy confidence drawing a small crowd of Vitalgenics employees. He was playing the part of the charming CEO, the face of our company, while I stayed in the shadows. Nathan was already making a beeline for him, dragging Ivy along. Mr. Grant, Nathan called, his voice eager. "Glad you could make it." Steven shook his hand, his smile professional but guarded. "Wouldn't miss it, Nathan," he said, his eyes flicking to me for a split second. Our secret hung between us, unspoken. Ivy pulled me into the circle. "Mr. Grant, this is my sister Hazel," she said, her voice syrupy. "She's a freelancer, kind of a free spirit." She laughed, but it was sharp cutting. Nathan jumped in, his grin wider. "Yeah, Hazel's not one for the corporate world. She's more uncommitted, you know." The word uncommitted hit like a dart, and a few colleagues stifled laughs. Steven's jaw tightened, but he played along. "Interesting," he said, his tone neutral. "Freelancing takes discipline." I shot him a look, silently begging him to stay quiet. He knew I was his partner, the one who'd built Vitalgenics' backbone, but he respected my choice to hide it. The conversation shifted to work, and Nathan couldn't resist bragging. "Mr. Grant, that hospital deal was a game changer," he said, puffing out his chest. I closed it in record time. I nearly choked on my drink. That deal was mine, my research, my strategy, my late nights. Nathan just delivered the pitch. Steven glanced at me, one eyebrow raised, but said nothing. Ivy beamed, proud of her fiancé's success. I wanted to scream to tell them I was the one who made it happen, but I stayed silent, my heart pounding. Patricia and Edward joined us, and the tension thickened. "Mr. Grant, you must be proud of Nathan." Patricia said, her smile practiced. "He's done so well at your company." Edward nodded, adding, "Takes ambition to climb like that." I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. They had no idea I'd vouched for Nathan's promotion, that I'd pushed Steven to give him a shot. To them, I was just the sister who'd never made it. Frank and Ellen, Nathan's parents, approached next. "Hazel, good to see you again," Frank said, his tone polite but distant. Ellen smiled thinly. Freelancing must give you so much freedom, she said, but her eyes said pity. I nodded, keeping my responses short. It does. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Every comment, every glance was a reminder of the box they'd put me in, a nobody, a failure, a shadow of ivy. Dinner was announced, and we moved to a long table set with crystal and candles. My place card was at the far end next to a cousin I barely knew, as far from Ivy and Nathan as possible. I sat down, the sting of exclusion sharp but familiar. Stephen was seated closer to the center, the honored guest, while I was relegated to the sidelines. I caught his eye and he gave a subtle nod, our old signal, "I've got your back." But I wasn't sure I had my own. The toasts began, each one more glowing than the last. Ivy and Nathan soaked it up, their smiles, perfect, their hands intertwined. Nobody asked me to speak. I wasn't surprised, but it hurt all the same. Patricia raised her glass, praising Ivy's drive and Nathan's success. Edward chimed in, calling them a power couple. I stared at my plate, the food untouched, my mind racing. Should I keep playing the nobody, let them have their moment? Or was it time to stop hiding? Nathan stood for his toast, his voice booming. To family, he said, his eyes skimming over me without stopping. And to those who push us to be better. Ivy nodded, her gaze lingering on me for a moment, her lips curling into that familiar smirk. I gripped my napkin, the urge to stand up and tell them everything about Vitalgenics, about my role, about the truth burning inside me. Stephen caught my eye again, his expression clear. Your call. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay seated. The dinner dragged on, every laugh and clink of glasses amplifying my isolation. As dessert was served, Ivy leaned over to a group of Vitalgenics colleagues, her voice loud enough to carry. Hazel's always been the free spirit, she said, her tone mocking. She's happy with her little freelance life, aren't you, Hazel? The table went quiet, eyes on me. Nathan laughed, adding, some people just aren't built for more. My face burned, but I kept my voice steady. I do all right, I said, meeting Ivy's gaze. She raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the moment. Stephen shifted in his seat, his calm demeanor cracking just a fraction. I knew he wanted to speak up, to tell them I was his equal, the co-founder of their precious company. But I shook my head slightly, signaling him to hold back. This wasn't the time, not yet. The dinner ended with more toasts, more laughter, but I felt like I was drowning. Ivy's words, Nathan's smugness, Patricia's indifference, they were all pushing me toward a breaking point. Tomorrow was the wedding, and I knew I couldn't stay silent much longer. The morning of Ivy's wedding dawned bright, the St. Augustine sun glinting off the ocean. I stood in my room at the seaside haven, adjusting the tie of my gray suit, elegant but understated, nothing to betray the truth I'd hidden for a decade. Last night's dinner still burned in my chest, Ivy's mocking words, Nathan's smug grin, the pitying glances from their guests. I'd swallowed it all, but today felt different. The Casa Monica Hotel awaited its courtyard, transformed for the ceremony, and with it a choice I couldn't dodge anymore. I arrived early, slipping into the crowd of white chairs arranged on the lawn. The floral arch framed the ocean, a perfect backdrop for Ivy's big day. Guests milled around, their chatter a low hum. Stephen was already there, standing near the front, his suit sharp and his demeanor calm. He caught my eye and gave a nod, our silent code. Nathan's parents, Frank and Ellen, were nearby, greeting guests with practiced smiles. I took my seat in the third row, not the front where family belonged, but not the back either. Another subtle jab, but I let it slide. The music swelled, signaling the start. Nathan appeared at the altar, adjusting his bow tie with a nervous grin. He looked every bit the golden boy, confident and polished. Ivy followed, gliding down the aisle on Edward's arm, her white dress shimmering in the sunlight. She was stunning, no question, but her smile held that same calculated edge I'd seen for years. Patricia sat in the front row, her eyes misty, clutching Edward's hand. I looked away, focusing on my breathing. This was their day, not mine. Or so I told myself. The ceremony was quick vows exchanged, rings slipped on a kiss that drew applause. I clapped too, but my heart wasn't in it. The joy I should have felt for my sister was drowned out by years of her dismissal, her superiority. As the guests moved to the banquet hall for the reception, I lingered watching Ivy and Nathan pose for photos, their laughter echoing. Stephen approached, his voice low. "You okay, Hazel?" he asked. "Stephen," I said, keeping my tone steady, "I'm fine. Just processing." He studied me, unconvinced, but didn't push. The banquet hall was a vision of elegance, white linens, seashell centerpieces, chandeliers casting a soft glow. My place card sat at a side table far from the newlyweds, next to a distant aunt who barely acknowledged me. Stephen was closer to the center, the VIP guest. I caught Patricia's eye across the room. She gave a small wave, but her smile was forced. Edward didn't bother looking my way. I sat the weight of my secret heavier than ever. The reception kicked off with toasts. Nathan's father, Frank, spoke first, praising his son's ambition. Ellen followed, gushing about Ivy's charm. Patricia stood next, her voice thick with pride. "Ivy and Nathan are proof that hard work pays off," she said, her gaze skipping over me. I gripped my glass, the urge to stand up and scream the truth growing stronger. Then Nathan took the mic, his smile wide. "To family," he said, raising his glass. "To those who lift us up and to those who, well, just do their own thing." His eyes landed on me and a few guests chuckled. Ivy smirked, leaning into him. I froze, my pulse racing. The room seemed to shrink, every laugh a needle in my skin. Stephen's gaze met mine, his expression a mix of sympathy and frustration. I shook my head slightly, signaling him to stay quiet, but Nathan wasn't done. He turned to Stephen, still holding the mic. "Mr. Grant, you've been a mentor to me at Vitalgenics," he said, his voice loud. "I owe you for my success." Unlike some people, he glanced at me, his grin sharp, who just coast through life, right? "Hazel." The room went silent, eyes darting between us. Ivy laughed, a short, cutting sound. "Oh, Nathan, be nice," she said, but her tone was anything but. That was it. The dam broke. I stood my chair, scraping the floor, every eye on me. "Nathan." I said, my voice calm but firm. "You're wrong." He blinked, caught off guard. Ivy's smirk faltered. Stephen leaned forward, his face unreadable. I took a breath, the words I'd held back for a decade spilling out. "I'm not a freelancer. I'm the co-founder of Vitalgenics. Your company, Nathan. Your boss, Ivy. Stephen and I built it together." The room gasped, a collective intake of breath. Nathan's face drained of color, his glass trembling in his hand. Ivy stared, her mouth half open, shock replacing her smugness. Stephen stepped forward, his voice steady. "She's right," he said. "Hazel's my equal partner. Has been since day one. Every major deal, every strategy, she's behind it." He looked at Nathan. "Including that hospital deal you're so proud of." The silence was deafening. Frank and Ellen exchanged confused glances. Patricia's hand flew to her chest, her eyes wide. Edward leaned forward, frowning. Ivy found her voice first, her tone sharp. "This is a joke, right, Hazel? You're not—" She trailed off, looking at Stephen, who nodded. Nathan laughed, but it was forced, nervous. "No way," he said. "You're a nobody. You've always been a nobody." I met his gaze, unflinching. "Check the company records, Nathan. My name's on every patent, every contract. I let you think I was a nobody because I wanted to be seen for me, not my success. But you and Ivy, I turned to her. You made it clear you don't care about me. You never did. Ivy's face twisted a mix of anger and betrayal. You lied to me, she hissed, stepping closer. All these years you let me think you were nothing. Why, her voice cracked, but her eyes were hard. Because you wanted to humiliate me. At my wedding, I shook my head. No, Ivy. I wanted you to love me as your sister, not as a status symbol. But you couldn't even do that. Nathan stepped between us, his face red. You're saying you're my boss, he demanded. You let me grovel to Mr. Grant. Let me think I earned my place when it was you. His voice shook with fury. I nodded. I vouched for you, Nathan. I pushed for your promotion. But you never asked about my life. You just assumed I was a failure. The crowd murmured guests, whispering, some pulling out phones to check Vitalgenics' website. Patricia stood, her voice trembling. Hazel, why didn't you tell us, she asked, but her tone wasn't warm, it was accusing. Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady, you wrote me off years ago. You all did. I built something without you, and I don't owe you an explanation. Ivy's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't for me. You ruined my day, she said, her voice low and venomous. You couldn't let me have this, could you? I swallowed hard, the weight of her words hitting me. I didn't plan this, Ivy, but I'm done pretending to be less than I am just to make you comfortable. Stephen touched my arm, his voice quiet. Hazel, you don't have to do this. I shook my head. I do, Stephen. I've been silent too long. I turned back to Ivy and Nathan, their faces a mix of shock and rage. You judged me without knowing me. You mocked me in front of your friends, your colleagues. This is the truth. Deal with it. The room erupted in whispers, guests staring openly now. Frank approached, his face stern. Hazel, is this true? He asked. You're really the co-founder? I nodded. Yes, Frank, and I'm done hiding it. Ellen stood beside him, her expression unreadable. This is unexpected, she said, her voice tight. Ivy grabbed Nathan's arm, pulling him away, her face pale. We'll talk later. She snapped, her eyes burning into mine. Nathan shook his head, still reeling. This changes everything, he muttered, more to himself than to me. They returned to their table, but the air had shifted. The reception continued, but the laughter felt forced, the toasts hollow. I sat back down, my heart pounding, a strange mix of relief and dread settling in. Stephen pulled a chair next to me, his voice low. You did it, he said. How do you feel? I exhaled, my hands trembling. Free and empty. He nodded, understanding. They'll come around. Or they won't. Either way, you're not invisible anymore. I looked at Ivy, whispering furiously to Nathan, her eyes darting to me. She wasn't my sister right now. She was a stranger, hurt and angry, just like I'd been for years. The night dragged on, guests avoiding me or whispering as I passed. Patricia tried to approach, but Edward pulled her back, his face grim. I didn't care. I'd dropped the mask and there was no going back. Tomorrow I'd face Ivy again, and I knew it wouldn't be pretty. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of her judgment. I'd claimed my truth, and whatever came next, I'd face it as Hazel Fisher, not the nobody they'd made me out to be. The reception ended in a blur of forced smiles and whispered gossip. Ivy and Nathan barely looked at me as they said goodbye to their guests, their faces tight with anger. I left the Casa Monica Hotel without a word, the weight of my revelation settling like a stone in my chest. Back at the seaside haven, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the gray suit I'd worn like armor. I'd told the truth, but instead of triumph, I felt hollow. Stephen texted me, "You did what you had to. Call me if you need me." I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to unpack the fallout yet. The next morning, I woke to a quiet St. Augustine, the town's charm lost on me. My phone buzzed with a notification, a letter delivered to the inn's front desk. The envelope bore Ivy's handwriting, neat and precise, addressed to Hazel Fisher. My stomach twisted as I opened it, already knowing what it held. The letter was formal, typed like something from a lawyer's office. "Dear Hazel," it began. "After your actions at our wedding, Nathan and I have decided to start fresh in Seattle. We've both accepted job offers there. Your deception has shown us we can't trust you. Please respect our need for space and do not contact us. Any necessary communication should go through our attorney, whose details are attached. Sincerely, Ivy Parker." I read it again, each word a sharp cut. No warmth, no room for reconciliation, just a cold final goodbye. A business card for their attorney was clipped to the letter, emphasizing the distance. I set it down, my hands shaking. Ivy wasn't just my sister anymore. She was a stranger closing the door on our relationship. Nathan's silence spoke louder than words. I'd expected anger, maybe a fight, but not this, a complete severance. Patricia hadn't reached out either, nor had Edward. Frank and Ellen had sent a polite text thanking me for attending, but it felt like a formality. I was alone, just as I'd always feared. I walked to a cafe near the inn, ordering a black coffee to steady myself. The barista chatted about the weather, oblivious to the storm inside me. I thought about calling Stephen, but what could he say? He'd warned me this might happen, that dropping my secret would burn bridges. I'd done it anyway, not for revenge, but because I couldn't carry the lie anymore. Ivy's letter made it clear she didn't want the truth. She wanted the version of me that fit her narrative, the nobody she could look down on. By noon, I was back in my room packing for my flight home. My phone rang. "Stephen." "Hazel, you okay?" He asked, his voice gentle but firm. "Stephen," I said, my throat tight. "They're done with me." Ivy sent a letter. "They're moving to Seattle, want no contact." He sighed. "I'm sorry. But you knew this was a risk." I nodded, though he couldn't see it. "I know. I just thought maybe she'd understand." He was quiet for a moment. "What now?" he asked. I didn't have an answer, not yet. Back in Miami, my condo felt emptier than ever. The familiar hum of my laptop, the stack of Vitalgenics reports on my desk, it all felt like a different life. I'd built this company with Stephen, poured my soul into it, but it was tied to a past I needed to leave behind. I called him the next day, my voice steady. "Stephen, I want to sell my shares. It's time for a clean break." He didn't argue, though I heard the disappointment in his silence. "You sure?" he asked. "This is your legacy, Hazel." I swallowed hard. It was. But I need to move on. We met at the Vitalgenics office a week later, a sleek glass building that had once been my pride. Stephen had the paperwork ready, his face serious. "You don't have to do this," he said, sliding the documents across the table. "You could stay on as a silent partner." I shook my head. "No, Stephen. I need to let go. For me." He nodded, signing the papers with a heavy hand. The sale would give me millions, enough to start over anywhere. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the freedom it bought me. I chose Austin, Texas for my new start. It was vibrant, growing far enough from Miami to feel like a fresh slate. I rented a small house near Zilker Park, nothing flashy, just a place to rebuild. My days were quiet at first, consulting for startups, mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing the knowledge I'd gained at Vitalgenics. I didn't miss the corporate grind, but I missed the purpose it gave me. I kept a low profile, avoiding the spotlight, but this time, it wasn't about hiding. It was about finding myself. Months passed, and I heard nothing from Ivy or Nathan. Patricia sent a single email, brief and formal, asking if I was settling in. I didn't reply. Edward, Frank, and Ellen faded into the background, their roles in my life reduced to memories. I'd check Vitalgenics' website sometimes, seeing Stephen's name in the headlines, New deals, new milestones. It stung, but it was a reminder of what I'd accomplished and what I'd lost. One evening, I found an old photo in a box I'd brought from Miami. Ivy and me kids, maybe 7 and 10, laughing at a county fair. Dad had taken it, his shadow just visible in the frame. We were happy then, before Patricia's ambition, before Edward, before the world split us apart. I stared at it, my chest aching. I'd wanted Ivy to see me, to love me, but I'd built a wall with my lies. Maybe she'd built one too. I tucked the photo away, not ready to let it go, but not ready to face it either. Sitting on my porch, I sipped coffee and thought about the past decade. I'd hidden my success to protect myself, to keep people from using me, but all it did was push away the ones I wanted to keep close. Ivy's letter was proof of that. I'd thought the truth would set me free, but freedom came at a cost. I'd lost my sister, maybe forever, but I'd gained something too, a chance to live without pretense, to be Hazel Fisher, not the nobody they'd labeled me. The truth is a hard thing. It can cut deeper than any lie, but it's the only way to build something real. I learned that too late, for Ivy, for Patricia, for the family we might have been. If I could go back, I'd tell my younger self to be honest from the start, to risk the rejection instead of hiding behind a mask. Lies protect you for a moment, but they steal years. Don't make my mistake. If you're hiding who you are, stop. The truth hurts, but it's the only path to real connection. Don't let fear cost you the people you love. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever faced family drama or kept a secret that changed everything, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more stories like mine. Stay true, stay real.